Robert Jenrick, he's been fast out of the traps. And some people are sort of saying, Kemi Badenoch, haven't heard from you yet, so maybe she'll need to speed up a bit.
Well, I asked both camps what's going on this morning. We want to cover them both as equally as we can. And Bobby J was at the Policy Exchange, so great, get down there for his speech at noon. I contacted Team Badenoch. What's Kemi up to today? She's out campaigning for a Tory local council candidate. So I said, oh, not media facing then. No, which I think is interesting because these ballot papers to the Tory membership are going out imminently, and we know from previous experience that they vote really quickly, this caucus of people. Efficient, competent, blue wall types, Kamal, maybe a bit older. And therefore, you have to absolutely hit the ground running, don't you?
I think that he's made the weather on day one, and that's really important. Even if the members haven't got their ballots yet, the very fact that he has laid out why him and not her. We were talking yesterday, weren't we, Camilla? If you have two people on the right, now, we had a very interesting conversation, didn't we, this morning, that they're not right as portrayed.
No.
You know, it doesn't quite work, but we know what we mean. If you've got two people who are accommodating the same wing of the party, what makes them different from each other? What's the choice? And that is what Robert Jenrick has got into today.
Absolutely. So he gave this speech. It was only 15 minutes. He's there, you know, vintage Bobby J, suited, booted, looking extremely neat and tidy, but for some stubble, bit of, what do you call it? A morning shadow? What do you call that?
5 o'clock shadow.
Thank you. Bit of a 5 o'clock shadow.
You might be going a bit Prince William. It's very
let's
cool
hope
now.
Not.
Very
He's
cool.
meant to be clean cut. I don't know whether the stubble works. But he got up there. He didn't say anything particularly original, and it was very much focused on immigration and him saying, again, that we have to leave the ECHR to get a grip of it. Let's listen to that.
I'm not prepared to allow terrorists and dangerous foreign criminals to roam our streets. I'm not prepared to allow illegal migration to continue for years, for decades to come. All because activist judges have created laws we never consented to, that elevate the rights of terrorists and criminals and illegal migrants over the British public and our national interest.
Now, do you remember Kamal at conference? He revealed that one of his daughters has the middle name Margaret Thatcher.
He does. He also revealed that he wasn't quite sure when Margaret Thatcher actually became the leader of the Conservative Party, because he tried to have this line about 1974 to 1924, because 1974 was when Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservatives. It was actually 1975. But, you know, those are mere details.
No, just a little bit of mathematical difference there. But, I mean, my goodness, he could have been wearing a twin set and pearls and wielding a black handbag as he spoke about the size of the state. So, in a nutshell, Kamal, where's he coming from? He's convinced MPs, along with Kemi Badenoch, that they're the best two of the four to go forward to the membership. Now, of course, he isn't the favourite with the membership, so he's got to convince them that he is a better bet than Badenoch, not just to lead the Conservatives into the future, but to also beat Labour and Reform come 2029. It was all quite subtle, but there were two clear messages in this speech. One, I have committed to leaving the ECHR and capping migration in the tens of thousands. Therefore, I'm a doer, whereas Badenoch, who is committed to neither, is a procrastinator, and we haven't got time to muck about on this issue. That's point one. I'm serious. I'm going to get things done. I'm going to keep my promises. And then the second offer from him, compared to his rival, is I'm the unity candidate. I don't start fights on Twitter, he said, which was clearly a very thinly veiled reference to Badenoch. I'm the one that can bring this party back together. The One Nationers have expressed some concern, haven't they, Kamal, that we've ended up with two righties in the final of the race. So he's there trying to ameliorate and basically say that he is the friendlier of the two in order to return to the... I mean, has there ever been a time when the Tory party has been singing... Like, has there ever been a time where the Tories have been a nest of singing birds? I can't remember it, but he thinks that he's the one who's going to conduct this orchestra, this Big Tent orchestra. So that's the sell. And to be fair, competent speech, well delivered, seemed to be catnip to the audience. Everyone sort of ticking the Bobby J bingo card, bring immigration down, take on Labour, leave the ECHR, deport foreign criminals. Lovely jubbly.
He's obviously going for speed. So being out there first, I think, is really important. And he seems to think it is convincing, I'm not so sure, that you need policy detail now. He is years away from
Yes.
government. The Conservatives are years away from government. However bad Labour becomes, there's not going to be an election for at least 4 years, you would imagine. Kemi Badenoch will fight on values and principles. Now, she does need to get on with it in laying out what this new battle is between the two of them. One thing, Robert Jenrick spoke behind a lectern. I think he maybe learned his lesson that wandering around trying
I
to
quite
speak
like
off
that.
the
You didn't
cuff.
like the wandering around.
I wasn't a
quite
huge
liked
fan of
it.
that. I thought it was good
He thinks
that he
it's
did that.
Cameronian, doesn't he, to not have to speak without notes.
I think he now needs to start playing to the Conservative Party, which is obviously going to be the next electorate, but also to the voters. And I just think he looks more authoritative behind a lectern. I thought, as you say, he delivered the speech well. It was he got lots of kind of applause. Obviously, his fans were in the audience, which I think was important. You have to remember, though, that only a third of MPs actually voted for him. So 2/3 of MPs didn't, voted for other candidates. And he writes in the Telegraph today, and in there, immigration is obviously very, very important. He talks about he doesn't want people in this country who are hostile to our values, but he hasn't yet made clear what those values actually are that people may or may not be hostile to. So I think he needs to do a bit of work there. But in his piece in the Telegraph, he talks about the NHS, he talks about public services, he talks about Andy Street, who is in Conservative terms, the very centre ground, One Nation former mayor of the West Midlands, former chief executive of John Lewis, who I bumped into at the Conservative Party conference, and he certainly wasn't happy with some of what might be described as the harder right-wing tone of some of the candidates. But the fact that Jenrick directly named Andy Street, I thought was interesting. So he's got to start thinking about what type of leader does he want to be, and is that ever going to be enough, Camilla, for the public who aren't as committed to the right or the Conservatives as the party will be? I can already see some evidence in his article in the Telegraph today, in some of the words he said in his speech, of just trying to say, I can still do a bit of Big Tent.
Yes, and I think Badenoch's going to do the same. Why has somebody like David Davis thrown his weight behind Badenoch, who, by the way, previously supported Penny Mordaunt? This idea that Badenoch and Jenrick are in the Suella Braverman camp is not an accurate description. I get the fact that Jenrick has been throwing around this red meat. Actually, yes, we can see Kemi as a strident culture warrior. She was actually criticised from some of the more Brexit hard wing of the party for not doing that bonfire of EU laws. We discussed that yesterday. Economically, neither of them have really set out their stall yet. So they can manoeuvre themselves into being a bit more Big Tent than they're currently being portrayed. They're being portrayed as righties by the left, who probably aren't the best judge of what rightyism actually is. I did speak to a veteran Tory in Westminster this morning before I went to the speech, who was making the point that normally when it comes to a vote of the membership between two candidates that are very often right and centrist, it goes about 2-1 against the centrist. In this case, clearly this vote is going to be very closer. It's even been reflected in our own Telegraph poll online, where, Kemi is ahead, but it's not like the Liz Truss versus Rishi Sunak sort of 70-30. It's much more sort of 60-40 and might get even narrower. That will mean that both of these pitches will have to be really clearly making an appeal that they are the future. On the timing thing, perhaps it is a mistake that Badenoch's calling this campaign Renewal 2030. Jenrick's trying to undermine that by saying, no, there's some immediacy here. We can't be talking about 2030. Yeah. We've got to be starting from now because Labour are imploding. So this whole idea, Starmer's in for 2 terms as a given, that's sort of collapsed.
Kemi Badenoch is going to have to sharpen her campaign messages. What Jenrick is starting to understand, and we saw it with Leave, Remain and the ECHR, very easy things that the electorate, whether that's the party or the general public, can remember. So he said, this is a choice. I am about leave the ECHR, cap migration, regain trust. Those are his 3 slogans. You can remember them straight away. It's like a pledge card almost. He kept saying, I'm not a man for slogans. And then he said, it's not a big state that fails, it's a small state that works.
Yes.
So he has
Quite
these...
a good line,
Yeah, he has these campaign lines that show that he knows, as leader of the opposition, you don't have much time to formulate your message.
Yes.
And if he can get that right and keep repeating it, people will automatically remember Robert Jenrick.
Yeah.
He wants a small state that works. Robert Jenrick, he wants to regain trust. Robert Jenrick, he wants to leave the ECHR. What are Kemi Badenoch's lines when you're asked, what does Kemi Badenoch think?